Daughters of the Empire, the end of an era. Prologue. The Empire of the Moon, the year was 2799. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, on a planet untouched by time, an empire thrived. Hera, a world as ancient as it was shrouded in mystery, was home to the most powerful rulers in the universe, the Empresses of the Moon, named after the Greek goddess who symbolized power, grace, and fertility. The planet was governed by a matriarchal dynasty that had ruled for centuries, but the Empresses did not come to power by mere inheritance. They were chosen. Every generation saw the birth of an extraordinary woman, one who embodied the strength, intelligence, and spirit of Hera herself. It was said that the empire was born from the goddess's will, and that her daughters were her legacy, a beacon of power for all the galaxy to see. At the top of this hierarchy stood Empress Hera, a woman of incomparable grace and authority. Her voice, though soft, commanded the attention of all who heard it, and her armies, the Amazons, fierce and disciplined, were the envy of the universe. Under her reign, the empire was at its peak, its fleets conquering new worlds, spreading the influence of Hera far and wide. But even as the empire flourished, something ancient stirred beneath the surface of the planet. A secret, long buried, waited in the garden of the Forbidden Mountains, a place where no one had dared tread for millennia. The garden was a symbol of the power of Hera, a place where the old gods whispered, but it was also a place of untold danger. Athena, the firstborn, daughter of Empress Hera, stood at the precipice of the garden, feeling its pull. Her mission, one entrusted to her by her mother, was clear. Venture into the Forbidden Mountains, uncover what had been hidden, and return with the knowledge that could protect the empire from the dangers that loomed in the dark reaches of space. Beside her was her twin sister Artemis, commander of the elite Amazonian warriors. Artemis was a woman of sharp focus, her mind as keen as her blade, and the bond between the sisters was unbreakable. They were more than allies. They were guardians of the empire, and their mission would test not only their strength, but also the very foundation of their beliefs. As the stars above Hera twinkled, a fleet of ships prepared to launch into the galaxy. The garden's secret was about to be revealed, and the fate of the empire rested in the hands of the Daughters of the Moon. Chapter 1. The call to arms. Athena stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind tugging at her silver armor as she gazed out over the vast expanse of the Forbidden Mountains. Beneath her feet, the landscape stretched far into the horizon, rugged, wild, and unyielding, much like the empire she was bound to protect. But there in the distance, beyond the mountain range, was the garden, a place whispered about in the deepest corners of the empire's history, its beauty hidden beneath a shroud of secrecy. Its time. Her voice was soft, yet it carried with it the weight of all the generations that had come before her. Athena, firstborn daughter of Empress Hera, was destined for greatness, but even she couldn't help but feel the unease gnawing at her. The legacy of the moon, the power that flowed through her blood, told her that this journey would change everything. "The fleet is ready, sister." A voice, strong and steady, broke through her reverie. Artemis, her twin, stepped up beside her. The Amazonian commander's armor gleamed in the morning light, and her eyes burned with the same unyielding determination that had seen her rise through the ranks of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. Athena nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the mountains. "We don't know what we'll find in there, Artemis." "We'll find what the galaxy needs," Artemis replied, her voice resolute. "The garden has secrets, Athena, and we're the ones destined to uncover them." Together, the sisters turned to face the ships that were lined up in the clearing below, a fleet of pristine vessels, sleek and powerful, each one a marvel of technology and design, waiting for their command to take flight. The ships were more than just tools of war. They were the symbols of their mother's rule, the weapons of their empire, and the protectors of the Hera dynasty. The mission was simple: uncover the secret beneath the garden and return to their mother, the Empress, with the knowledge that could safeguard their world. But Athena knew it would not be that easy. The garden was a living entity, ancient and untamed, and the dangers it held were beyond their comprehension. Athena, Artemis, a voice cut through their conversation. It was the voice of their mother, Empress Hera, calling from the distant observation tower. The twins exchanged a glance before turning to make their way toward her. The Empress stood at the balcony, her figure silhouetted against the galaxy beyond. Her presence was majestic, her silver crown glinting like the stars. But there was a weight to her expression. Hera had always been a woman of unwavering resolve, but today, something in her eyes was different. She knew the stakes of this mission, and her gaze lingered on her daughters, as if knowing the paths they were about to walk might not lead them back. You both know what's at stake. Hera's voice was soft, but it carried the force of 1,000 empires. The garden holds the truth of our bloodline, but there are forces that will stop at nothing to keep it buried. You must be prepared for what lies ahead. Athena nodded. We'll succeed, Mother. We will bring the truth back. But Empress Hera's expression grew more somber. I hope you are right. With one last glance at her daughters, Hera turned away, her figure fading into the shadows. The fleet was ready, the mission set. The future of the Empire rested in their hands. Let's go, Artemis, Athena said, her voice no longer filled with doubt. The time for hesitation had passed. Together, they climbed into the lead ship, their warriors following close behind. As the engines roared to life, Athena felt a shiver run down her spine. The stars above beckoned them forward, but the garden, that forbidden place of secrets and darkness, was waiting. The fleet ascended into the heavens, their ships cutting through the atmosphere, leaving the world of Hera behind. The sisters, their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission, turned their gazes to the stars. The adventure had begun. Chapter 2. The Forbidden Path. The vastness of the galaxy stretched out before them, a sea of stars so numerous that it seemed as though the universe itself had woven them into an endless tapestry. The ships moved swiftly, cutting through the vacuum. Space, their sleek designs defying the laws of gravity as they headed toward the forgotten moon that lay near the Forbidden Mountains. Athena stood at the helm of the lead ship, her dark eyes fixed on the shifting landscape below. The moon was a lifeless rock, marred by craters and deep ravines, its surface a barren wasteland. There was no sign of life here, only the shadows of ancient structures long forgotten by time. As the fleet descended toward the surface, a strange silence filled the air. Even the hum of the ship's engine seemed muted, as if the world beneath was holding its breath. The garden, the heart of the mountain range, lay hidden beneath the rocky terrain, and no one had dared to venture there in centuries. Its entrance was concealed, a secret buried deep within the labyrinthine valleys and sharp cliffs that surrounded it. Artemis, standing beside Athena, clenched her fists, her mind already working through the tactics of any potential threat. Her warriors were ready for anything, but even she couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at her. There was something wrong about this place. She could feel it in her bones, an ancient power pulsing beneath the ground, beckoning them closer. Sister, do you feel that? Artemis whispered, her voice low. Athena didn't look away from the viewport, her expression unreadable. I feel it. Her voice was heavy with an unspoken understanding. There's a darkness here, a presence we can't yet comprehend. The fleet descended further, the towering peaks of the Forbidden Mountains now within sight. The garden was said to be hidden in a valley deep within these mountains, where the jagged cliffs created a natural barrier. For centuries, no one had ventured close enough to uncover its true nature, except for a few who had disappeared without a trace. Their ship's landing gear thudded against the rocky ground, and the sudden jolt of the ship settling onto the moon's surface snapped Athena and Artemis out of their reverie. We're here, Athena's voice was resolute, though she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. The path before them was shrouded in secrecy and danger. Whatever lay in the garden would either make or break their empire. The air was cold and thin, the moon's atmosphere barely sustaining their breath. Athena stepped out of the ship first, her boots crunching against the dust. The landscape was eerily quiet. There were no sounds of wildlife, no whispers in the wind, only the vast emptiness of the world surrounding them. Artemis followed, her keen eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The rest of the fleet, a dozen ships in total, remained anchored behind them, their landing sites secure. The warriors disembarked, fanning out around the perimeter to ensure the area was safe. "We move out in groups of 3, Artemis ordered, her voice sharp and commanding. "Stay alert. Whatever we find here is not meant to be found." They began their descent toward the valley where the garden was rumored to lie. The mountain pass they navigated was narrow, the walls of rock closing in around them, creating a feeling of claustrophobia despite the vastness of the surrounding landscape. Athena led the way, her hand on the hilt of her sword, ready for any threat. She had led her armies into battle countless times, but this was different. The garden wasn't an enemy they could fight with weapons alone. It was an enigma, a puzzle, that needed to be solved with wisdom as much as strength. Hours passed as they trekked deeper into the mountains. The further they went, the colder the air became, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer. The once clear path grew more treacherous, the rocks beneath their feet sharp and uneven. But Athena, Artemis, and their warriors pressed on, undeterred by the growing discomfort. Then, at last, they saw it. The entrance to the garden was hidden behind a massive stone arch, half ruined by time but still standing tall. Ancient runes were carved into the stone, their meanings lost to history. The archway was surrounded by a dense fog that shimmered faintly in the low light, as if the very air around it was alive. "This is it," Athena murmured, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no turning back now. Whatever awaited them inside would change everything they thought they knew about their empire, and about their lineage. As they approached, a faint hum seemed to vibrate through the ground, sending a tremor through Athena's bones. She looked down at the stone path beneath her feet, her eyes narrowing. The stones weren't just rocks, they were alive, pulsing with energy, as if they had a heartbeat of their own. "Stay close," Artemis ordered, her voice steady but laced with a hint of unease. She could feel the strange energy too, its presence unsettling. She motioned for the warriors to form a protective circle around the sisters as they stepped forward into the archway. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world seemed to shift. The air grew thick, the fog enveloping them in a cold embrace. A low hum reverberated through the ground, filling the silence with an almost mournful sound. They moved deeper into the garden, their surroundings growing ever more strange and surreal. Giant, twisted trees with leaves that shimmered like silver loomed over them. The ground was soft, almost like silt, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers that Athena had never seen before, vivid, luminous petals that seemed to glow in the twilight. It was breathtaking and terrifying all at once. Suddenly, a sound broke through the eerie silence. A low growl echoed from the depths of the garden, deep and rumbling, followed by a flicker of movement in the shadows. The warriors tightened their formation, weapons ready. But the sisters held up their hands. "Wait!" Athena commanded, her senses on high alert. Something was moving, something large, and it wasn't human. Her heart raced as she realized they were no longer alone. Before she could issue another order, the growl grew louder, closer, and then, from the mist, emerged a creature, tall, gaunt, with eyes like burning coals. It was humanoid, but its body seemed twisted, as if shaped by the ancient forces of the garden itself. Its skin shimmered, like an oily sheen under the moonlight. It took a slow step forward, its eyes locking onto Athena. The air crackled with an unnatural energy as the creature growled once more, its voice a low, guttural hiss. "Leave, or perish." Its voice was like an echo from the past, filled with malice and warning. Athena's grip tightened on her sword. She knew this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead in the garden would test their strength, their resolve, and their very belief in what they thought they knew about the Empire. The darkness they had felt was real. The power hidden beneath the soil was alive, and it had awakened. "We are the daughters of Hera," Athena said firmly, her voice unwavering. "We do not fear what lies beneath the earth." But even as she spoke those words, she couldn't shake the feeling that their destiny and the future of the Empire was no longer in their hands. Chapter 3. The Heart of Darkness. The creature's presence loomed over them like a storm cloud, its glowing eyes locked on Athena with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Its form, tall and gaunt, seemed to ripple as if its very existence was not bound by the laws of the physical world. The low growl reverberated through the air, vibrating the ground beneath their feet, as though the garden itself was alive, reacting to their intrusion. "We are not here to harm you," Athena said, her voice calm but firm, attempting to reason with the creature. Her hand never strayed far from her sword, but she had no desire to provoke a fight, not yet. They needed answers, not bloodshed. The creature's gaze flickered to the warriors behind them, its molten eyes scanning them one by one. Then with a snarl, it spoke again, its voice a guttural rasp that seemed to echo from the very heart of the mountains. "You are trespassers. The garden is not for you." Athena stepped forward, her heart pounding but her mind clear. "We seek the truth of this place. We seek the knowledge of the garden to protect our people. We are daughters of Hera." At the mention of their mother's name, the creature's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment Athena thought she saw something akin to recognition. But it was fleeting. The creature's expression twisted into something almost mocking, its lips curling into a grotesque smile. "Hera's bloodline. The daughters of the Empress." The creature's voice was thick with disdain. "The truth you seek is not the truth you want. You may think you are ready, but the garden will show you what lies beneath the surface of your empire, what your mother has kept hidden for eons." A wave of unease washed over Athena. There was something in the creature's words that stirred a deep instinctive fear. She glanced at Artemis, whose face was hard with determination, yet even she seemed unsettled. "What are you?" Artemis asked, her voice carrying the authority of a warrior but betraying a hint of wariness. The creature tilted its head, its sharp features twisting in a grotesque semblance of thought. "I am the guardian, the keeper of the garden's secrets." Before Athena could respond, the creature stepped back into the mist, its form vanishing as suddenly as it had appeared. The low hum that had been reverberating through the ground died down, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The warriors immediately tensed, their hands on their weapons, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. But the creature was gone, leaving nothing but the faint shimmering fog that now seemed to hang even thicker in the air. "It's gone," Athena whispered, but her voice lacked certainty. She couldn't shake the feeling that the creature's words had left a mark on her, a warning she couldn't yet fully understand. But there was no time to dwell on it. "We move forward." Athena's command was swift and firm. Despite the unsettling encounter, they had come too far to turn back now. They ventured deeper into the garden, the air thick with a strange energy that seemed to pulse and shift around them. The trees, towering and twisted, seemed to grow taller as they moved forward, their glowing silver leaves casting an ethereal light across the path. The ground beneath their feet felt soft and moist, as if the very earth was alive, breathing with them. Suddenly the warriors began to slow their pace, their expressions shifting from alert to confused, then alarmed. There was something in the birihu, a strange, almost hypnotic energy. Athena felt it first, a subtle shift that pricked at her skin, making the hairs on the back of her neck rise. "Athena, something is wrong," Artemis said, her voice low but urgent. She stopped and glanced around, her eyes narrowing. "I don't know what it is, but this place is changing." Athena nodded, her own instincts warning her that they were about to cross into something even darker. The garden was not just a place of ancient beauty. It was something far older and far more dangerous. "We must be close," Athena said. "Stay together. Whatever happens, do not break rank." They moved forward again, the fog growing thicker with every step. The light from the glowing trees dimmed, and a sense of dread began to settle over them like a heavy weight. Then they saw it, an opening in the center of the garden, where the mist parted just enough to reveal a large circular pool of water, its surface perfectly still and reflective. At the center of the pool, a stone pedestal rose from the depths, and atop it rested something ancient, a glowing orb, its light pulsing gently, almost as if it were alive. The sight of it took Athena's breath away. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, but there was something unsettling about it. The way it seemed to call to her, beckoning her closer. Her heart beat faster as she stepped forward, the rest of the warriors following closely behind. "What is that?" Artemis asked, her voice tinged with awe and apprehension. Athena stepped closer to the edge of the pool, her gaze fixed on the orb. Her mother had spoken of something hidden beneath the garden, something older than the Empire itself. Could this be it? The artifact that held the answers they sought? "I don't know," Athena replied softly, her voice almost a whisper. "But I think it's what we came for." She reached out, her fingers hovering just above the surface of the water, her body drawn to the orb as if by an invisible force. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a surge of energy shot through her, so powerful that it almost knocked her off her feet. The light from the orb flared brighter, and the ground beneath them trembled, as if the garden itself was waking. Suddenly the air filled with a thunderous roar, and the surface of the water erupted, sending waves crashing toward them. Figures began to emerge from the pool, dark, shadowy forms, their eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. They were wraith-like, their bodies ethereal but full of malice. The guardians, the protectors of the orb, had awakened. "Get back!" Artemis shouted, drawing her sword as the warriors fanned out, preparing for battle. But the wraiths were not enemies that could be struck down with steel. The first wraith lunged at Athena, its cold hands grasping for her throat. Her heart raced as she dodged, her instincts kicking in. But the creature's touch left a burning chill on her skin. "We need to leave!" Artemis shouted, her voice urgent as she cleaved through the wraiths that surrounded them. But Athena stood firm, her eyes locked on the orb, which pulsed with an almost sentient awareness. The answers they sought were within reach, but so were the consequences. The ancient power of the garden was not meant to be disturbed, and now they were caught in its grip. "We have to take it," Athena said, her voice rising over the chaos. "We can't leave empty-handed. This is what will save the Empire." The wraiths howled as they closed in, their forms growing more solid with every moment, and Athena knew there was no turning back. She had made her choice, and now, the garden would make hers. Chapter 4. The Awakening of Shadows. The wraiths surged forward with terrifying speed, their shadowy forms flickering like ghosts in the mist. Their eyes, burning with an eerie, malevolent fire, fixed on Athena as she stood, poised above the shimmering pool. The orb had responded to her touch, its energy surging through her body with the force of 1,000 storms. But the consequences were swift. "Athena!" Artemis's voice was sharp with urgency as she swung her sword at the nearest wraith, her blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. The wraith shrieked, its form dissipating momentarily before it reformed, more solid than before. "We can't keep fighting them," Artemis gritted through clenched teeth. She spun to face her sister, her eyes wide with the recognition of the power they were up against. "They're not like anything we've ever faced." Athena's hand trembled as she gripped the edge of the pedestal, her fingers brushing against the orb once more. The power that emanated from it was like a living force, pushing against her skin, tugging at the very essence of her being. The world around her seemed to blur, the edges of reality bending as if the garden itself was awakening in response to her touch. "We need to take it now!" Athena shouted over the growing wails of the wraiths. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. The orb was the key. They could not leave without it. But as her fingers closed around it, the world shifted violently. A deafening roar filled the air, a primal, guttural sound that vibrated the very earth beneath their feet. The mist around them thickened, swirling like a storm, and the wraiths seemed to grow larger, their forms more menacing, their eyes glowing with an unnatural fury. "They're drawing power from the garden," Artemis yelled, slicing through another wraith that came too close. The orb is feeding them. It's not just a relic. It's a conduit. Athena's grip on the orb tightened, and in that instant she felt something shift within her. The orb's energy coursed through her veins, filling her with a cold, burning sensation. She could feel the ancient power of the garden, its secrets, and its history, surging through her like a river of forgotten knowledge. Visions flashed before her eyes, visions of empires long past, of a world ruled not by her mother but by another. A darker empire, one built on the very essence of the garden itself. And there, in the heart of the vision, was a figure. A woman, with hair as dark as night, her eyes glowing with the same intensity as the orb's light. Her face was hauntingly familiar, yet Athena knew this was no mere illusion. This was her ancestor, the first empress, the one who had hidden the secrets of the garden. The vision dissipated in an instant, but the knowledge lingered, searing itself into Athena's mind. "What did you see?" Artemis asked, breathless as she fought off another wraith. Her voice was filled with urgency, but there was an edge of fear there too. Athena stumbled back, the orb still in her hands, and her voice faltered as she spoke. It's not just a relic. It's a prison, a conduit, and it's tied to our bloodline." The wraiths howled in fury, their forms twisting violently, and the ground trembled beneath them as if the garden itself was in pain. The wraiths attacked in unison, swarming the sisters and their warriors, their cold, incorporeal bodies flashing in and out of existence like a nightmare made real. "We need to get out of here," Artemis shouted, slashing at the nearest wraith. But the creatures were relentless, their speed too great to outrun. "No!" Athena's voice was firm, her resolve solidifying in the midst of the chaos. "We can't leave without understanding it. We have to know what this means." As Athena spoke those words, a pulse of energy erupted from the orb, spreading outward in a shockwave that knocked the wraiths back. The guardians screamed in agony as the power of the orb flared, their bodies disintegrating into wisps of smoke before reforming. The pulse of energy didn't stop. It continued to radiate outward, forcing the wraiths back further, until the entire garden seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the heart of the garden, a new presence made itself known. The ground shook violently, and a massive figure emerged. From the fog, a towering humanoid shape, almost too large to comprehend, with armor that seemed to shimmer like the night sky. It was an imposing sight, its presence so overwhelming that it felt like the very air around it had frozen. The figure's eyes burned with an ethereal light, glowing brighter than the orb itself. It was a being of immense power, one that seemed to transcend the physical world. "Leave this place." The voice was deep and resonant, as if it came from the earth itself. It carried an ancient authority, a command that vibrated through their very bones. Athena felt the energy from the orb surge through her once more, a rush of knowledge and power that almost overwhelmed her. The figure spoke again, this time its voice colder, more insistent. "You are not meant to wield the power of the garden." The wraiths ceased their attack, retreating into the shadows as if summoned by the figure's command. Athena, her body trembling with the energy coursing through her, stood tall before the towering figure. Her heart raced, but her resolve was stronger than ever. "I am Athena, daughter of Hera, and I will not be turned away." The figure's glowing eyes flickered, and a low hum filled the air as if the very fabric of reality itself was being torn apart. The orb pulsed in Athena's hands, its light matching the intensity of the figure's gaze. "You cannot fight what has been hidden for millennia." The figure's voice softened, almost as though it were trying to warn them. "The garden has its protectors for a reason. To wield its power is to bear the weight of an ancient curse. You will either destroy what is left of your empire, or you will become its greatest saviors." The words lingered in the air like a curse, and for the first time, Athena felt the weight of the decision she had made. The garden was not just a source of power. It was a force that could tear apart everything she knew, everything her mother had built. But there was no turning back now. The answers were within reach. The Empire's fate and her own, hung in the balance. The massive figure raised a hand, and the orb in Athena's grasp began to glow brighter, its light nearly blinding. The figure's voice reverberated one final time. Only those who understand the garden can survive its secrets. Chapter 5. The Price of Knowledge. The giant figure before them loomed like an unyielding force of nature. It was neither truly human, nor entirely a creature of the garden. The shimmering armor that adorned its massive frame seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as though the very fabric of the figure's being was woven from the garden itself. Its eyes burned with a light that no mortal could endure, yet Athena found herself standing taller, defiant, despite the growing weight of its presence. You cannot control what you have awakened. The voice was softer now, almost mournful, yet laced with a deep ancient authority. The garden does not forgive. Athena's pulse hammered in her ears, the orb still glowing brightly in her hands. The overwhelming sensation of its power filled her, like an electric charge running through her veins. She could feel the ancient knowledge it contained, a history far older than the empire itself, coiled within its heart. But along with the power, there was something else, a gnawing unease, a dread that churned deep in her stomach. We do not seek to control it. Athena's voice cut through the tension, steady but firm. We seek to understand it. We seek the truth that has been hidden from us. Artemis stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. She held her sword in a defensive stance, her gaze flicking between the glowing figure and her sister. Tell us what you are protecting. We've seen what this place can do. The wraiths, the guardians, they are only the beginning, aren't they? The figure's eyes flickered as though considering the question. For a long moment there was only silence, the air thick with the weight of what was unsaid. Finally, it spoke again, its voice like a low, mournful hum. You seek knowledge, but knowledge comes at a cost. The figure's gaze moved from Athena to Artemis, then back to the orb. You must understand the price before you take what you came for. The words felt like a warning, a prophecy, and Athena couldn't help but shiver despite the warmth of the orb's glow. The price, she had always known there would be one. But to hear it spoken aloud, to feel the truth of it reverberate in her bones, was something else entirely. What price? Athena asked, though she already feared the answer. The figure took a slow, deliberate step forward, its massive form looming over them like a storm cloud. The garden is not a place of mere beauty. It is a reservoir of power, a living force that holds within it the very lifeblood of the empire. Athena's heart skipped a beat. The empire, she echoed, her voice barely a whisper. But the garden has been hidden for centuries. My mother, your mother, the figure interrupted, has kept the truth from you. But the truth cannot stay buried forever. The garden was not always a place of refuge. It was once a battlefield, a place where the ancients fought to control the very essence of existence. What your mother hides, what you hold in your hands, is the key to that ancient conflict. Athena's eyes widened as the words sank in. The orb was not just a relic. It was the key to an age-old war, one that had been fought long before their empire had ever risen. But why now? Why awaken this power? Artemis asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of curiosity and fear. What is the garden really protecting? It is protecting the truth, the figure answered. The truth that the Empress has sought to keep buried. The truth that the bloodline of Hera is tied to a legacy of destruction. Your empire was built on a lie that must be revealed. Athena staggered back as though struck, her breath caught in her chest. The weight of the figure's words hung heavy in the air, threatening to crush her. Could it be true? Had her mother lied to them all these years? The figure's voice softened, almost pitying. The garden is a repository of all that was lost during the ancient war. It was meant to protect what remained, until the right time came, the time for revelation. And now the time is upon you. Athena closed her eyes for a moment, her hands tightening around the orb. She could feel its pulse, steady and unrelenting like the beating of a heart. It was almost as if the orb were alive, its ancient energy flowing through her, urging her to see what it had to show her. But what if the price was more than she could bear? What do we do now? Artemis asked quietly, standing beside her sister. She reached out, her hand brushing Athena's arm in solidarity. How do we move forward? The figure did not respond immediately. Instead, it looked at them both with an expression that seemed to mix both sadness and resignation. Finally, it spoke again, its voice heavy with the weight of inevitability. You must decide what you will sacrifice. The figure's gaze flickered to the orb in Athena's hands. The truth cannot be understood without first embracing the cost. Athena stood still, her heart racing. She could feel the pull of the orb, its energy coursing through her, urging her to unlock its secrets. But the cost, it was not something she could ignore. The weight of the figure's words hung over her, like a shadow, dark and unyielding. I can't, Athena began, but the figure silenced her with a raised hand. You are already too far gone to turn back. The figure's voice was final, unyielding. The price has already begun. Sudden tremor rocked the ground beneath their feet, causing Athena to stumble. The figure's form flickered for a moment, as though it were becoming one with the garden itself. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, like the sound of an ancient bell tolling, marking the passage of time. It is done. The figure intoned. The truth will be revealed to you now, but be warned. The knowledge you seek will change everything. With those final words, the figure began to fade, its form dissolving into the mist. The wraiths, which had stood silent, throughout the exchange slowly retreated into the shadows, their eerie eyes still burning with an unsettling glow. The garden had quieted, its strange energy subsiding, leaving an unsettling calm in its wake. Athena could still feel the pull of the orb in her hands, its power thrumming like a heartbeat. Athena. Artemis's voice broke through the silence, her tone soft but filled with concern. What do we do now? Athena took a deep breath, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic mix of fear, resolve, and anticipation. She had come seeking the truth, but the truth, as she now understood, was not something that could be easily taken. The garden was alive, and it had shown them its power, but it was not a power that could be wielded without consequence. The decision was no longer just about saving the Empire. It was about confronting the very foundation of their existence, and that foundation was far darker than she could have ever imagined. We move forward, Artemis. Athena's voice was steady, though the weight of her words was heavy. But we must be ready for whatever comes next. The garden will not give us its secrets without a cost. And so, with the orb still glowing in her hands, Athena and Artemis prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The price of knowledge was steep, but there was no turning back. The garden's secrets would be revealed, and the future of the Empire would be forever changed. Chapter 6. The heart of the garden. The mist had settled, but the air still hummed with the faint, lingering power of the orb. Athena stood with it in her hands, the weight of its energy pressing down on her chest like 1,000 stars colliding. It was as if the garden itself was breathing, a living entity that had awoken in response to her touch. The feeling of its power, both exhilarating and terrifying, filled her senses, and she could not shake the nagging thought that they were no longer in control. Athena turned to face Artemis, whose brow was furrowed with concern. The shock of their conversation with the mysterious figure, the one who had claimed to be a guardian of the garden, still lingered between them like an unspoken question. There were more answers to find, more truths to uncover. But now, those answers seemed as dangerous as the dark force that had surrounded them. We've come this far. Athena's voice was steady, though she could feel her hands trembling ever so slightly. But we need to understand more. The figure wasn't just a protector. It warned us about the Empire's past. We need to know what our mother has kept hidden. Artemis nodded, her expression determined but guarded. She glanced around, her gaze scanning the swirling mist that had once held the figure. The shadows of the garden, the elusive whispers of its ancient power, all seemed to pull at the edges of their perception. "Let's move forward, Athena." Artemis's voice was firm. "The truth won't wait for us to catch up." With a shared look of resolve, the sisters pressed on, their footsteps muffled by the soft, damp ground of the garden. The dense mist seemed to part before them, swirling, like a curtain that led deeper into the heart of this forbidden world. The deeper they traveled, the more oppressive the air became. The plants, though still vibrant and strange in their beauty, seemed to move with an unnatural grace, their leaves shifting like the movement of thoughts, like the garden itself was aware of their presence. A strange sense of being watched crept over Athena, but each time she looked behind her, there was only mist, empty shadows, and the distant echoes of their footsteps. "This place," Artemis muttered, almost to herself. "It feels like we're walking through someone's memory, or worse, a dream we can't escape from." Athena nodded, but she didn't voice the thought that had been lingering in her mind. The thought that the garden wasn't just a place of power, but a place of secrets, ones tied directly to the fate of their empire, and perhaps even to their bloodline. The sound of water trickling in the distance reached their ears, and Athena felt her heart skip a beat. The heart of the garden. Her thoughts raced. The figure had spoken of it, but they hadn't understood its meaning. Could they be close? As they ventured further, the trees began to thin, revealing a vast, glowing pool of water at the center of a large, open cavern. It was unlike anything Athena had ever seen. The water shimmered with a soft, ethereal light that seemed to pulse in time with the beating of her heart. Above the pool, a massive tree rose from the ground, its branches heavy with strange, luminous fruits. The roots of the tree were intertwined with the very stones of the cavern floor, as if it were one with the garden itself. This was the heart. And standing at its edge was an ancient stone altar, weathered by time but still emanating an undeniable energy. Athena could feel the pull of it, like a magnetic force, and despite the voice of caution that whispered in her mind, she found herself stepping closer. "This is it," Artemis breathed, her voice filled with awe. She moved beside Athena, her hand brushing the air just above the glowing water. "This is the source, Athena, the heart of the garden." Athena's eyes never left the altar. Something about it called to her, a presence both comforting and unsettling. As she moved closer, the orb in her hands began to thrum, its light flashing, with an intensity that illuminated the entire cavern. The moment the orb's light touched the pool's surface, a sharp crack split the air. The cavern trembled, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Athena staggered, her vision blurring for a moment as a wave of energy surged from the pool, enveloping her in its light. The decision was no longer just about saving the empire. It was about confronting the very foundation of their existence, and that foundation was far darker than she could have ever imagined. "We move forward, Artemis." Athena's voice was steady, though the weight of her words was heavy. "But we must. Be ready for whatever comes next. The garden will not give us its secrets without a cost." And so, with the orb still glowing in her hands, Athena and Artemis prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The price of knowledge was steep, but there was no turning back. The garden's secrets would be revealed, and the future of the empire would be forever changed. Then, everything went still. The light from the orb faded, but the pool's glow remained, pulsing like a heartbeat. Athena could feel the shift, the change in the air. There was something different now. The water in the pool began to move, slowly at first, then more rapidly until it surged upward, forming a shape, a figure emerging from the depths. The figure's form was vaguely human, its features obscured by the shimmering water, but Athena could feel its power. It was ancient, impossibly old, and filled with a strange, otherworldly presence. The figure's voice came as a low, resonant whisper. "You have come seeking the truth, but what you will find here may not be what you expect." Athena's heart raced as she stepped forward, her grip tightening on the orb. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the figure. "What is this place? What is the truth you guard?" The figure raised a hand, the water flowing around it like liquid silk. "We are the keepers of the garden's heart." The voice was familiar, yet foreign. It echoed with the depth of time itself. "The truth you seek is not one of simple answers. It is a legacy of choices, choices made by your ancestors and by those who built the empire you know." Athena felt a wave of dizziness wash over her as the figure's words sank in. The legacy. It wasn't just about the orb. It was about everything. The empire's foundation, the secrets Hera had hidden from them, the choices their bloodline had made long ago. "What are you asking of us?" Athena's voice was barely a whisper. "What do we need to do?" The figure's expression softened, almost as though it had been waiting for this moment for eons. "You must choose, Athena." The figure's voice was filled with gravity. "The heart of the garden holds the power to reshape the world, but to do so requires a sacrifice." Athena's pulse quickened. She exchanged a look with Artemis, who stood beside her, her brow furrowed in concern. "A sacrifice?" Artemis asked, her voice tight with fear. "What kind of sacrifice?" The figure's eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed brighter, as if it were looking directly into their souls. "Only by sacrificing what you value most can you unlock the truth you seek. The path you choose will either redeem the empire or destroy it." A heavy silence fell over the cavern. Athena's breath caught in her throat as the weight of the figure's words pressed down on her. The orb pulsed again, its glow intensifying, as though it had become a living thing that thrived on her uncertainty. She felt the pull of the garden's heart, but now she was unsure if it was her own desire for the truth, or something far darker, something the garden itself wanted her to claim. The decision was no longer just about saving the empire. It was about confronting the very foundation of their existence, and that foundation was far darker than she could have ever imagined. "We move forward, Artemis." Athena's voice was steady, though the weight of her words was heavy. "But we must be ready for whatever comes next. The garden will not give us its secrets without a cost." And so, with the orb still glowing in her hands, Athena and Artemis prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The price of knowledge was steep, but there was no turning back. The garden's secrets would be revealed, and the future of the empire would be forever changed. Chapter 7. The choice of the bloodline. The air in the cavern seemed to thicken, as though the very atmosphere itself was waiting for them to make their choice. Athena stood frozen, the pulse of the orb in her hands resonating like a heartbeat. In the stillness, the figure, this ancient presence rising from the pool, hovered before them, its ethereal form flickering like a distant memory. Its eyes, glowing faintly, burned with a quiet intensity. The weight of its words hung heavy in the air. "The path you choose will either redeem the empire or destroy it." "Sacrifice," Athena murmured, her voice barely more than a whisper. The word echoed through the cavern, ringing like a death knell in her ears. She could feel her heartbeat pounding against her chest like a warning. "What do you mean by sacrifice?" The figure's face remained unreadable, but there was something in the way it moved, its slow, deliberate gestures, that made it clear it knew far more than it was revealing. "Your bloodline, Athena," it began, its voice deep and resonant, vibrating through the cavern, "has always been bound to the power of the garden. It was a pact made long ago, a pact forged in fire and blood. To unlock the truth you seek, you must release the power that binds you. But to do so, you must sever your connection to it, forever." Artemis took a cautious step forward, her gaze flicking from the figure to her sister. "Sever the connection? How?" The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it stretched one hand toward Athena, the water rippling at its touch. The movement seemed so natural, as though the figure itself was one with the garden, its existence, intertwined with the very lifeblood of this place. "The power you seek is not an artifact to be held or controlled," the figure explained. "It is part of you, part of your bloodline, but it is also a curse, a burden carried by the Empress Hera and her daughters for generations. To unlock the truth, you must be willing to let it go. The power that flows through your veins is what sustains the empire, but it is also what keeps you tied to a past you cannot escape. Athena's heart skipped a beat. She felt the orb pulse in her hands, a deep thrum that seemed to reverberate through every fiber of her being. The power, it had always been a part of her. She had always known she was different, that her connection to the garden was unique, that the orb called to her in ways it never had to anyone else. But to sever that connection, to give up the very thing that had shaped her destiny, her strength, her legacy, her thoughts spiraled, torn between the enormity of the choice before her and the overwhelming pull of the garden's truth. Why now? Why not let the empire remain as it is? Artemis's voice was strained, her gaze fixed on the figure. Why destroy the balance we've worked so hard to build? The figure's gaze softened. Because the empire you know is built on a lie. The truth of your bloodline, of your mother's reign, has been hidden from you for centuries. To truly save the empire, you must first destroy the foundation upon which it stands. A chill ran down Athena's spine. She had suspected for some time that there was something more to their empire, something buried beneath the surface. But to hear the figure confirm it in such stark terms was a blow she had not been prepared for. The very foundation of their world was built on a lie. Could her mother, Empress Hera, have been hiding something so monumental for all these years? What do you mean? What is the truth? Athena asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and rising fury. The figure's eyes flashed, the faint glow intensifying. The truth is that the bloodline of Hera is cursed. The very power that sustains the empire has always come at a terrible cost. Your mother, Empress Hera, has kept this hidden from you. The pact forged with the garden centuries ago has been a double-edged sword. The empire has thrived, but at the expense of countless lives, lives that were sacrificed to maintain the balance. Athena's breath caught in her throat. The realization struck her like a lightning bolt. All this time she had believed that the power of the garden, passed down through generations, was a gift. But now she saw it for what it truly was, a curse. And the sacrifice? Artemis asked, her voice tight with understanding. The power we carry in our blood. What must we give up to release it? The figure's form shifted, becoming more translucent, its features obscured by the mist swirling around it. To sever the connection, you must sacrifice your lineage. The words echoed, each one cutting into the sisters like a blade. You must give up your claim to the throne, your inheritance, and all that you have known. You will become nothing, Athena. Nothing but a vessel for the truth of the garden. And once you release the power within you, the future of the empire will be sealed. No longer will you be bound to its past. No longer will the bloodline of Hera hold dominion over the empire. The silence that followed felt suffocating, the weight of the figure's words pressing down on them both. So that's it? Athena whispered, her voice hollow. I give up everything, everything that defines me. And for what? To set the truth free, to destroy the only world I've ever known. You would destroy the empire to save it? Artemis's voice was filled with quiet fury, but also sorrow. Is that what you're asking, Athena? To throw away everything, just to satisfy some ancient, impossible ideal? The figure's eyes darkened, its voice growing deeper. Sometimes the greatest act of salvation is the willingness to destroy what we cherish most. Only by embracing the sacrifice can you unlock the truth. Only by severing your ties to the power of the garden can you free the empire from the cycle of destruction it has known for centuries. Athena stood still, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She could feel the power of the garden swirling around her, its pull growing stronger with every passing second. But was it worth it? Was it worth the destruction of everything she had fought for? Her mother had built an empire that had endured for generations. To tear it down, to let go of the bloodline that had carried them all this far, it felt like The ultimate betrayal. But Athena knew deep down that there was no choice. The truth had been hidden for far too long, and the price of continuing the lie was too great. The Empire had to change, and if she was the one to tear it down, to sacrifice her bloodline for the greater good, then so be it. I will do it, Athena said, her voice steady, though the weight of her decision nearly crushed her. I will sacrifice everything. The garden's truth will be known. The Empire will be free of its chains. The figure nodded, a deep sorrow in its eyes. Then you are ready. The choice is made. The future will be yours to shape. But be warned, Athena. Once you sever the connection, there is no turning back. And with that, the figure reached out, its hand brushing the orb. The world trembled. The figure's gaze softened, almost mournful. You will find your own path, Artemis. The power of the garden was always a double-edged sword. The Empire thrived under it, but at a cost. Now, without it, the true test begins. Will you build something new, or will the chaos consume all that remains? The figure began to fade, its presence slipping back into the mist. The future is yours to shape. Its voice was the last thing Athena heard before it disappeared entirely. The cavern was still, and the silence felt deafening. Athena's breath came in ragged gasps as she slowly pulled herself to her feet. Her legs shook, and the weight of her decision pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. It's over, Athena. The bond is broken. Artemis's voice was soft but resolute. Now we face the consequences. Athena nodded slowly. She looked around the cavern one last time, her eyes lingering on the now empty pool of water, the ancient altar where the garden's power had once been. A sense of finality hung in the air. The consequences, Athena repeated quietly, her voice distant. Yes, and we will face them. Together. Artemis stepped forward, placing a hand on Athena's shoulder. Together. For the first time since the moment they had stepped into the garden, Athena allowed herself to breathe. The bond was broken. The power was gone. And now, they would have to find a new way forward, a new path, free from the chains of the past. But the future was uncertain. The Empire was in turmoil, and there would be no easy answers. There would be challenges, dangers, waiting for them in the wake of their decision. The garden had offered them the truth, but the truth came at a terrible price. And now, the future of the Empire rested on the shoulders of two sisters who had chosen to break the past and embrace the unknown. Of her ancestors, the power that flowed, through her veins the very energy that had sustained the Empire. Everything was being severed. Athena's mind reeled, her thoughts scattering as memories of the garden, of the Empire, of her mother's reign flickered in and out of focus. The figure of the guardian, still looming above them, watched with an inscrutable gaze, its voice reverberating through the air like the ringing of a distant bell. You have chosen, Athena. The bond is broken. The words were not comforting. They were a finality. The truth is now yours to bear. With a deafening crack, the orb shattered in Athena's hands. The light erupted outward, and the cavern was flooded with the overwhelming force of the release. Athena screamed, the sound raw and primal, as she felt her connection to the garden, her power, her legacy, disappear. Then, silence. The pulse of the orb was gone. The air was still, unnervingly still, as if the garden itself had been torn apart from the inside. Athena collapsed to the ground, her body spent and trembling. Artemis rushed to her side, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Athena? Artemis whispered, her hands shaking as she cradled her sister's head in her lap. Please say something. Athena's eyes fluttered open, but they were different. The light that had once burned with power within them was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow emptiness. The energy that had defined her, her entire being, was gone. The weight of the sacrifice she had made pressed down on her, but there was no comfort in it, no sense of victory, only the quiet realization that nothing would ever be the same. It's done, Artemis. Athena's voice was weak but steady. The bond is broken. For a moment they simply sat there, the magnitude of what had just occurred settling around them like a suffocating fog. Artemis could feel the weight of Athena's words, but she couldn't comprehend the full depth of the sacrifice. To give up the power of the garden, to give up everything that had made her who she was unfathomable. The figure loomed over them, its gaze unwavering. "You have severed the connection, Athena. You have released the Empire from the chains of its past." Athena struggled to sit up, her body trembling with exhaustion. "And what now?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "What happens next?" The figure's form shimmered, ripples running through its surface like the distortion of water. "The future of the Empire is no longer bound to the past." It spoke with the finality of a sentence passed down by the gods. "The bloodline of Hera is no more. The choice is yours, Athena. The Empire's future is in your hands. What will you build now?" Artemis clenched her fists, her eyes fierce. "What do you mean?" she demanded, standing protectively over her sister. "What are we supposed to do now that the garden's power is gone? How do we save the Empire?" Chapter 8. The Breaking of the Bond. The cavern seemed to hold its breath as Athena extended her hand, the orb pulsing violently in her grasp. The moment her skin touched the ancient stone altar, a surge of energy shot through her body, sending shockwaves through her chest. The very fabric of her being trembled, as though the garden itself was being torn apart. Athena's knees buckled beneath her, and she gasped for air, feeling as though the weight of the universe itself was pressing down on her. The orb burned, hot in her hands, a blinding light wrapping around her like tendrils of fire. The ground beneath her quaked, the cavern's walls shuddering as if the garden had awakened from a long, deep slumber. Artemis rushed to her side, but the energy surrounding Athena was so intense that she couldn't get any closer. The power of the garden, the very essence of her bloodline, was being ripped away from Athena, and with it, the very foundation of everything they knew. It was a pain like nothing Artemis had ever witnessed. Athena's body contorted in agony, her fingers clutching the orb as if trying to hold onto a memory, something that was slipping through her grasp. "Athena!" Artemis cried out, reaching for her sister. But Athena's voice, hoarse and strained, cut through the chaos. "Stay back, Artemis," she gasped. "I have to do this. I have to finish it." The orb flared with a brilliant light, so bright it seemed to outshine the sun. The very air around them seemed to crackle with energy, the essence of the garden itself recoiling from the act taking place. Athena's heart beat faster, each pulse resonating with the raw power coursing through her veins. It felt as though every fiber of her being was being undone. But she refused to stop. She felt the connection to the garden begin to unravel, the bond that had been formed through the blood of her ancestors, the power that flowed through her veins, the very energy that had sustained the Empire. Everything was being severed. Athena's mind reeled, her thoughts scattering as memories of the garden, of the Empire, of her mother's reign flickered in and out of focus. The figure of the guardian, still looming above them, watched with an inscrutable gaze, its voice reverberating through the air like the ringing of a distant bell. "You have chosen, Athena. The bond is broken." The words were not comforting. They were a finality. "The truth is now yours to bear." With a deafening crack, the orb shattered in Athena's hands. The light erupted outward, and the cavern was flooded with the overwhelming force of the release. Athena screamed, the sound raw and primal, as she felt her connection to the garden, her power, her legacy, disappear. Then, silence. The pulse of the orb was gone. The air was still, unnervingly still, as if the garden itself had been torn apart from the inside. Athena collapsed to the ground, her body spent and trembling. Artemis rushed to her side, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. "Athena?" Artemis whispered, her hands shaking as she cradled her sister's head in her lap. "Please say something." Athena's eyes fluttered open, but they were different. The light that had once burned with power within them was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow emptiness. The energy that had defined her, her entire being, was gone. The weight of the sacrifice she had made pressed down on her, but there was no comfort in it. No sense of victory, only the quiet realization that nothing would ever be the same. "It's done, Artemis." Athena's voice was weak but steady. "The bond is broken." For a moment they simply sat there, the magnitude of what had just occurred settling around them like a suffocating fog. Artemis could feel the weight of Athena's words, but she couldn't comprehend the full depth of the sacrifice. To give up the power of the garden, to give up everything that had made her who she was unfathomable. The figure loomed over them, its gaze unwavering. "You have severed the connection, Athena. You have released the Empire from the chains of its past." Athena struggled to sit up, her body trembling with exhaustion. "And what now?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "What happens next, Abor?" Figure's form shimmered, ripples running through its surface like the distortion of water. "The future of the Empire is no longer bound to the past." It spoke with the finality of a sentence passed down by the gods. "The bloodline of Hera is no more. The choice is yours, Athena. The Empire's future is in your hands. What will you build now?" Artemis clenched her fists, her eyes fierce. "What do you mean?" she demanded, standing protectively over her sister. "What are we supposed to do now that the garden's power is gone? How do we save the Empire?" The figure's gaze softened, almost mournful. "You will find your own path, Artemis. The power of the garden was always a double-edged sword. The Empire thrived under it, but at a cost. Now, without it, the true test begins. Will you build something new, or will the chaos consume all that remains?" The figure began to fade, its presence slipping back into the mist. "The future is yours to shape." Its voice was the last thing Athena heard before it disappeared entirely. The cavern was still, and the silence felt deafening. Athena's breath came in ragged gasps as she slowly pulled herself to her feet. Her legs shook, and the weight of her decision pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. "It's over, Athena. The bond is broken." Artemis's voice was soft but resolute. "Now we face the consequences." Athena nodded slowly. She looked around the cavern one last time, her eyes lingering on the now empty pool of water, the ancient altar where the garden's power had once been. A sense of finality hung in the air. "The consequences," Athena repeated quietly, her voice distant. "Yes, and we will face them. Together." Artemis stepped forward, placing a hand on Athena's shoulder. Together. For the first time since the moment they had stepped into the garden, Athena allowed herself to breathe. The bond was broken. The power was gone. And now, they would have to find a new way forward, a new path, free from the chains of the past. But the future was uncertain. The Empire was in turmoil, and there would be no easy answers. There would be challenges, dangers, waiting for them in the wake of their decision. The garden had offered them the truth, but the truth came at a terrible price. And now, the future of the Empire rested on the shoulders of two sisters who had chosen to break the past and embrace the unknown. Of her ancestors, the power that flowed, through her veins the very energy that had sustained the Empire. Everything was being severed. Athena's mind reeled, her thoughts scattering as memories of the garden, of the Empire, of her mother's reign flickered in and out of focus. The figure of the guardian, still looming above them, watched with an inscrutable gaze, its voice reverberating through the air like the ringing of a distant bell. "You have chosen, Athena. The bond is broken." The words were not comforting. They were a finality. The truth is now yours to bear. With a deafening crack, the orb shattered in Athena's hands. The light erupted outward, and the cavern was flooded with the overwhelming force of the release. Athena screamed, the sound raw and primal, as she felt her connection to the garden, her power, her legacy, disappear. Then, silence. The pulse of the orb was gone. The air was still, unnervingly still, as if the garden itself had been torn apart from the inside. Athena collapsed to the ground, her body spent and trembling. Artemis rushed to her side, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Athena? Artemis whispered, her hands shaking as she cradled her sister's head in her lap. Please say something. Athena's eyes fluttered open, but they were different. The light that had once burned with power within them was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow emptiness. The energy that had defined her, her entire being, was gone. The weight of the sacrifice she had made pressed down on her, but there was no comfort in it, no sense of victory, only the quiet realization that nothing would ever be the same. It's done, Artemis. Athena's voice was weak but steady. The bond is broken. For a moment they simply sat there, the magnitude of what had just occurred settling around them like a suffocating fog. Artemis could feel the weight of Athena's words, but she couldn't comprehend the full depth of the sacrifice. To give up the power of the garden, to give up everything that had made her who she was unfathomable. The figure loomed over them, its gaze unwavering. You have severed the connection, Athena. You have released the Empire from the chains of its past. Athena struggled to sit up, her body trembling with exhaustion. And what now? She asked, her voice hoarse. What happens next? The figure's form shimmered, ripples running through its surface like the distortion of water. The future of the Empire is no longer bound to the past. It spoke with the finality of a sentence passed down by the gods. The bloodline of Hera is no more. The choice is yours, Athena. The Empire's future is in your hands. What will you build now? Artemis clenched her fists, her eyes fierce. What do you mean? She demanded, standing protectively over her sister. What are we supposed to do now that the garden's power is gone? How do we save the Empire? Chapter 9. The Empire unraveled. The stars above them were cold and distant as Athena and Artemis stepped back into the heart of the Empire, the capital city of Lysandra. The towering spires, once gleaming with the power of the garden, now seemed tarnished, their once vibrant glow dimmed. The air was thick with uncertainty, and the weight of their decision pressed down on the city, seeping into every corner of the Empire. Athena could feel it, the shift in the air. It was as though the entire galaxy held its breath, waiting for something to happen, something to change. But what? She didn't know. All she knew was that the garden was gone, its power severed, and with it the very foundation of the Empire. The people will feel the loss, Artemis said quietly, her eyes scanning the city below them. The power that sustained them is no longer there. We can't pretend it won't have consequences. Athena's gaze hardened. I know, but what choice did we have? The truth had to come out. The Empire has been built on lies for too long. She paused, her thoughts swirling. The destruction of the bloodline of Hera, the severing of the garden's power. It had felt right in that moment. It had felt necessary. But now, standing on the precipice of a crumbling empire, she couldn't shake the gnawing doubt that had settled in her gut. The truth always comes with a price, she murmured, and the cost is higher than I ever imagined. As they descended to the capital's landing platform, Athena's mind raced. The leaders of the Empire were undoubtedly already reacting to the absence of the power that had guided them for centuries. The Senate, the military commanders, the noble houses, all of them had relied on the power of the garden to maintain control, to sustain their influence. Without it, they were vulnerable. A figure stepped forward from the shadows as they landed. The distinct silhouette of Lady Seraphine, one of the highest-ranking members of the Imperial Senate, her expression unreadable. Her silver hair flowed around her like a cloak, her eyes sharp and calculating as they locked onto Athena. Empress Athena, Commander Artemis, she said, her voice cold but respectful. The news of your actions has spread across the Empire. The garden has been severed, and the power it once provided is no more. Do you have any explanation for this sudden change? Athena stood tall, meeting Lady Seraphine's gaze with an intensity that matched her own. The truth of the garden has been hidden for far too long, she said, her voice unwavering. It was never meant to control us. It was a lie. a power built on sacrifice and suffering. The Empire no longer needs it. Seraphine's eyes narrowed, but she remained silent for a moment as if weighing Athena's words. Finally, she spoke again, her tone sharper now. "And what of the Empire? What of its stability? You've removed the very foundation upon which it stands. You've left us vulnerable." "We're not vulnerable, Seraphine," Athena replied, her voice steady. "We're free. The Empire doesn't need the garden to survive. We will rebuild it on new principles, on truth, on unity, not on the lies that have held us together for centuries." Artemis crossed her arms, her gaze cold as she studied Seraphine. "Do you have a problem with that, Senator?" Seraphine bristled, her lips pressing into a thin line. "A problem? I don't think you understand the gravity of what you've done, Commander. You've upset the balance. The people are terrified. Without the power of the garden, the Senate's authority is in question. The military is in disarray. This is not a time for idealism, it's a time for action." Athena's jaw tightened, her resolve hardening. "I understand more than you think, but we won't fix things by clinging to the past. We have to chart a new course, one that's not bound to old powers." Seraphine's eyes flashed with something dangerous, something Athena couldn't quite place. "You think you've freed the people, but you've only given them chaos." Without another word, Seraphine turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The tension between them hung in the air long after she was gone. Athena and Artemis exchanged a look, both understanding the weight of what had just transpired. They had only just begun to understand the full implications of their actions. "The Senate won't let us do this easily," Artemis said, her tone grim. "They won't surrender their power without a fight. They won't have a choice," Athena replied, her voice cold. "We'll show them that the garden was never the source of our strength. The people can rise on their own, without being shackled to ancient lies." But even as she spoke those words, a small voice of doubt whispered in the back of her mind. The Empire had been built on the power of the garden, its institutions, its military, its very fabric intertwined with the energy it had provided. What would happen to all of that now? What would happen to the people, to the soldiers, to the houses that had lived and thrived under that power? The answers were unclear, but one thing was certain. Athena and Artemis had irrevocably changed the course of the Empire. Now they had to lead it through the storm they had unleashed. As they moved deeper into the heart of the Empire, the weight of their decisions settled on them like a crushing burden. The news of the garden's severing had spread like wildfire, and the world was reacting in ways they hadn't anticipated. The streets of Lysandra were filled with whispers and rumors, a palpable fear hanging in the air. In the military quarters, the soldiers were restless. Without the power of the garden, they were uncertain of their loyalty. Would they follow Athena, or would they splinter into factions, vying for power in the absence of the Empress's command? The noble houses were no less unsettled. The bloodline of Hera had always been the bedrock upon which they had built their influence. Without the strength of the garden, their positions were no longer guaranteed. "What now?" Artemis asked, her voice filled with the weight of the moment. Athena paused, her gaze scanning the horizon. "We move forward. We fight for the future." Together, the sisters walked side by side into the unknown, each step heavier than the last. The Empire had been undone, but it was not beyond saving. They would rebuild it, no matter the cost. Chapter 10. The Storm of Factions. The air in the Imperial Palace was thick with tension. Every hallway seemed to whisper with rumors, and the once sleek corridors now felt like the winding paths of a labyrinth, each turn hiding new dangers. Athena could feel the weight of every eye that followed her, every step she took. The silence was suffocating, but the tension, oh, the tension was louder than any words could be. In the council chamber, the seats once filled with the voices of unity now echoed with discord. The noble houses were in disarray, their representatives locked in heated arguments that carried through the thick marble walls. Their words, once carefully chosen and deliberate, were now laced with panic and suspicion. The power that had held them together, the garden, The bloodline of Hera was gone. The foundation was crumbling. Athena stood before them, the weight of their scrutiny pressing down on her like 1,000 suns. She hadn't expected their support, but she hadn't expected the outright hostility that greeted her arrival either. Empress Athena, Lord Maris, the representative of House Valranis, sneered from his seat. His eyes, once calculating and strategic, now bore the look of a man whose carefully constructed world had been shattered. You've broken the very fabric of this empire. The garden was our foundation, and now it's nothing but ashes. The people have been shackled by the garden's power for too long, Lord Maris, Athena said, her voice cutting through the murmur of dissent. It was time to break the chains. We must rebuild, but we will not rebuild on lies. Lord Maris scoffed. You think the Empire can survive without the power of the garden? Without the bloodline of Hera to guide us? You're a fool, Empress. The people will not follow you into the void. At the opposite end of the chamber, Lady Seraphine stood in silence, her arms crossed, watching with a calm expression that barely concealed the storm brewing beneath the surface. Athena's eyes met hers, and the silent exchange spoke volumes. Lady Seraphine was the Senate's most powerful voice, and her words would carry the weight of the galaxy. The people are afraid, Athena, Lady Seraphine finally said, her voice soft yet firm. They need stability. Without the garden, they have nothing to hold on to. You've made a grave mistake. I've done what was necessary, Athena replied, her tone unyielding. This empire has been built on a foundation of lies, of manipulation. We cannot continue to live in the shadow of the garden. It is time to step into the light. There was a murmur of discontent from the assembled lords and ladies. Some nodded in agreement with Athena's sentiment, but most were skeptical, their loyalty wavering like a ship caught in a storm. Athena's eyes swept the room, settling on a young commander at the back of the chamber, General Tyrell. His house, though not as influential as the noble families of old, commanded a significant portion of the empire's military. His presence was a silent but potent reminder that without the military's support, Athena's reign would be nothing but an illusion. General Tyrell stood, his posture tall and imposing. Empress, he said, his voice gravelly. I served under your mother, and I understand the importance of the garden's power, but I must admit I am troubled by what has happened. The military depends on the power you severed. Without it, we are vulnerable. Athena clenched her fists, feeling the weight of his words. The military was the backbone of the Empire's strength, and General Tyrell's doubts echoed the fears of countless others in the ranks. The soldiers were uncertain, questioning whether they could follow an empress who had removed the very power that had kept them in control for centuries. General, the military's strength was never meant to come from the garden. Artemis stepped forward, her eyes fierce. You have the loyalty of the people, the heart of the empire. The power was never meant to be in an orb, but in the people themselves. You have the strength to lead without it. Tyrell's gaze flickered toward Artemis, his jaw tightening. Perhaps, but loyalty is a fragile thing. It can be broken as easily as it's made. The silence in the room deepened. Athena's pulse quickened as she realized the truth in Tyrell's words. Without the power of the garden, their authority was fragile. It would take more than speeches to win the loyalty of the Empire's factions. She would need to act, to prove that she could lead without the garden's strength. Her mind raced, but before she could respond, the chamber doors slammed. Then a new voice rang out, harsh and filled with malice. The Empire is doomed, and you know it, Athena. The room fell silent as the tall, dark figure of Commander Mavros strode into the chamber, his uniform adorned with the insignia of the Imperial fleet. His reputation was notorious. Known as the Iron Hand of the Empire's military, Mavros was a man of brutality and efficiency. He had served the Empire for decades, and his loyalty had always been to the strength of the garden, not to any ruler. Mavros, General Tyrell said, his voice guarded. What are you doing here? I'm here to deliver a warning, General. Mavros's cold eyes swept across the room, settling on Athena. Your decision to sever the garden has consequences. You've created a power vacuum, and there are forces outside this room already preparing to seize it. The people will turn against you, and we'll be left with nothing." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber as Mavros's words sank. Athena's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that the consequences of her actions had not only caused unrest within the Empire, but had also drawn the attention of forces beyond their control. "Who are you referring to?" Athena demanded, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "The faction of the Shattered Blade." Mavros's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You've heard of them. They've been building strength for years, waiting for a moment like this. Now that the garden's power is gone, they'll make their move, and they will stop at nothing to take control." Athena's breath caught in her throat. The faction of the Shattered Blade was a dangerous underground movement, one that had been growing in strength, operating in the shadows. They were fanatical, ruthless, and determined to overthrow the existing order, believing that the garden's power had corrupted the true spirit of the Empire. Now, with the Empire fractured and vulnerable, they were poised to strike. "What do we do?" Artemis asked, her voice low but filled with resolve. Athena clenched her fists. The Shattered Blade, the Senate's factions, the military's uncertainty, everything was unraveling. But she would not let the Empire fall into chaos, not while she still had breath in her body. "We fight," Athena said, her voice filled with newfound strength. "We unite those who still believe in the future of this empire. We will face the storm together." The storm of factions had only just begun, and Athena knew that the true test of her leadership had only just begun, but she was ready. Chapter 11. The gathering storm, the wind howled across the battlefield, carrying with it the scent of distant thunder. Athena stood at the edge of the great plateau, her eyes scanning the horizon as the last remnants of daylight faded into a violent, purple twilight. The stars were already emerging, bright pinpricks of light that seemed far too small for the weight of the moment. The Empire was teetering on the edge of collapse, and she could feel the pressure in her bones. "We can't delay any longer, Athena." Artemis's voice broke through her thoughts, sharp with the urgency that had become the pulse of their lives in recent weeks. The gathering storm of factions was no longer a distant threat. It was upon them, and it was only a matter of time. Before the first strike was made, Athena turned to face her sister, her expression hard but resolute. "I know," she replied, her voice unwavering despite the chaos swirling within her. "We need to move before they do." The two sisters stood together on the edge of the plateau overlooking the sprawling capital city of Lysandra below. The city had always been a symbol of the Empire's might, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens, casting shadows over the lands. But now, beneath the lights of the city, something else lurked: fear, anger, and uncertainty. The Empire was fractured. The garden's power had been severed, and now the Senate, the military, and the noble houses were all scrambling to hold on to what remained. They had lost their foundation, and in the vacuum of power, they were turning on one another. And lurking, in the shadows, the faction of the Shattered Blade had begun to stir, its presence growing stronger with each passing day. Athena knew that they couldn't wait for the storm to hit them. They had to face it head-on, but it wasn't just a matter of military strength anymore. The Empire's soul was at stake, and in the hearts of its people, the seeds of rebellion had already been sown. "We've sent the message. The emissaries are gathering our allies." Artemis's voice softened slightly, her gaze shifting toward the horizon. "But there's one problem. Many of them still believe in the old ways. They're afraid to break from the past." Athena's gaze hardened as she glanced at her sister. "Then it's our job to show them what the future can be." Their alliance was fragile. They had been pulling together a coalition of the willing, those who still believed that the Empire could be rebuilt, that it could be something more than what it had been. But the rest, the ones who clung to the past, who believed the garden's power was the only thing that had ever held the Empire together, they were a threat. The faction of the Shattered Blade had grown in numbers, a shadowy organization that had operated beneath the surface for years, biding its time. They were fanatical, believing that the Empire's true strength lay in its severance from the Garden, and they would stop at nothing to impose their vision of what the Empire should become. A vision of complete destruction. "They'll be here soon," Artemis murmured, scanning the darkening sky. "The faction. They won't stop until they have everything." Athena clenched her fists at her side. "And we won't stop until they're dealt with." They turned and made their way toward the command center, a cold steel structure that stood at the heart of the Imperial military complex. Inside, the room was alive with activity, holographic displays casting eerie blue light on the faces of the commanders and strategists, working tirelessly to prepare for the storm ahead. General Tyrell was already there, his tall form looming over, a table filled with maps and schematics. His eyes flicked up as Athena and Artemis entered, and he nodded grimly. "Empress Athena, Commander Artemis." Tyrell's voice was low but steady. "We've received word that the faction has begun moving. They're taking cities in the outer provinces. They're gaining ground faster than we anticipated." Athena's jaw tightened. "What cities?" "Zarathis, Amalia, and Teldra. The faction is sweeping through the provinces with precision, like a storm. The local forces are overwhelmed. We're running out of time. The faction is more organized than we thought." Artemis crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing in thought. "They're moving faster than they should. How are they doing it?" General Tyrell hesitated for a moment before responding. "We don't know yet, but we suspect there's more to this than just local uprisings. There's a core group, a leader. We haven't been able to identify them, but whoever they are, they're pulling the strings from the shadows." Athena's mind raced. "We can't afford to waste time. The longer we let them gain ground, the harder it will be to stop them. We need to strike fast." The commanders nodded in agreement, and the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with the weight of their decisions. The Empire was on the verge of war, not just with the shattered blade, but with the very foundations of its own identity. "We've gathered our forces." General Tyrell's voice broke the silence. "But the people are divided. We can't expect them to follow us if they don't believe we have a clear vision for the future." "Then we show them the future," Athena said firmly. "We don't just fight for the empire we had. We fight for the empire we could become. Future where the Garden's power is no longer the crutch we lean on. We fight for freedom, for truth, for unity." Artemis stepped forward, her expression resolute. "The faction wants to destroy the Empire. We're going to rebuild it, stronger, more united than ever before. But we can't do it alone. We need the people on our side." Athena nodded, her eyes meeting the gaze of every commander in the room. "This is the moment. The storm is upon us, and we're going to face it together." The next days were a whirlwind of strategy, diplomacy, and battle preparations. Emissaries were sent to the remaining noble houses, hoping to sway them to their cause. Senators were approached in hushed meetings, promises of a future beyond the Garden's grasp offered to those who would listen. But for many, the past was too deeply ingrained. Fear ran deep. The faction's influence was growing stronger with every passing moment. Athena and Artemis worked tirelessly, rallying their forces, preparing their allies, and keeping a careful eye on the rising threats. They knew the stakes were high, and the faction was not their only enemy. As the forces of the Empire prepared for the inevitable clash, Athena stood once more on the plateau, the wind biting at her skin. The storm was close, but she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Are you ready?" Artemis asked, standing beside her. "We've come this far," Athena replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We're ready. The Empire will rise again." Chapter 12. The Shattered Blade. The roar of battle was deafening. It wasn't just the clash of steel and the whir of blasters. It was the sound of an empire teetering on the edge of destruction, each strike a reminder that the world Athena had known was being torn apart. The air was thick with smoke, the sky stained with the red of fires burning in the distance. A storm of chaos had descended upon the Empire, And now, here on the battlefield of Teldra, Athena and Artemis stood at the center of it all. "We can still win this," Artemis called over the din of battle, her voice calm but intense as she slashed through another enemy combatant. Her Amazonian warriors fought alongside her, moving like a storm of their own, cutting through the chaos with lethal precision. The Shattered Blade forces were relentless, but they had underestimated the strength of Athena's forces. The balance was tipping in their favor. Athena, standing atop the rubble of a fallen command tower, surveyed the battlefield. Her eyes darted across the war-torn landscape, scanning for any signs of weakness. Her armor was bloodied, her once perfect appearance now marred by the realities of war. But there was fire in her eyes, a fierce determination that would not be extinguished. "We have them cornered, Athena," General Tyrell shouted, his voice grim but tinged with hope as he fought beside her. His soldiers were slowly pushing the Shattered Blade forces back, but they were still far from victory. The Wei faction had made this fight personal, and they had a leader, someone ruthless, someone determined to destroy the Empire as Athena knew it. But where is their leader? Athena demanded, gripping her weapon tightly. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. If the leader of the Shattered Blade remained in the shadows, pulling the strings of this uprising, they couldn't truly claim victory until they brought them to the light. General Tyrell grimaced. "We don't know. They've been using guerrilla tactics, keeping their leader hidden. But word is they're close." Athena's jaw tightened. The faction of the Shattered Blade had been the Empire's greatest threat since the Garden's fall. But now, in the heat of battle, their leader remained elusive. Whoever they were pulling their forces with terrifying precision, using fear and chaos to fuel their cause. A familiar voice cut through the noise. "We've got company." Athena turned to see Artemis approaching with a grim look. On her face, her Amazon warriors fanning out behind her, their eyes scanning the horizon. "What is it?" Athena asked. "The faction leader," Artemis said, her voice low. "They're making their move." Athena's heart raced. If the faction's leader was finally revealing themselves, this was their moment. The decisive moment that would either break them or bring them the peace they so desperately sought. "Where?" Athena demanded. "East, in the ruins of the old city." Artemis pointed to the crumbling remnants of the ancient city of Zarathus, now a shell of its former glory. The Shattered Blade had begun their assault here weeks ago, and it was here that Athena knew their final confrontation would fold. "Then we go." Athena set her jaw, her voice steely. "This ends now." The ruins of Zarathus were eerily silent, a stark contrast to the battle raging just beyond the city's walls. Dust and debris swirled in the air, creating an almost haunting atmosphere. Athena's footsteps were steady, the echoes of her boot strikes bouncing off the jagged stone walls that once stood as a monument to the Empire's might. Now, they were just graves, silent witnesses to the battle for the future of the Empire. Artemis, Tyrell, and a small battalion of elite soldiers followed closely behind. Athena's heart pounded in her chest, a cold sense of anticipation settling in her bones. She could feel it. This was the moment that would determine everything. The future of the Empire hung in the balance. As they reached the center of the ruins, Athena's gaze locked onto a figure standing in the midst of the destruction. A tall, cloaked silhouette, their presence commanding and dangerous. The leader of the Shattered Blade. The figure turned slowly, their face hidden beneath a dark, ornate helmet, but the voice was unmistakable. It echoed through the ruins with chilling confidence. "So we meet at last, Empress Athena." The voice was deep, resonating with an authority that made Athena's blood run cold. This was no ordinary rebel leader. This was someone who understood the stakes, someone who had played this game for far too long. "Who are you?" Athena demanded, stepping forward, her hand on the hilt of her blade. "What do you want?" The figure's lips curled into a twisted smile beneath the helmet. "What do I want?" They laughed, the sound echoing around the desolate city like a phantom from the past. "I want what you've already taken, Empress. I want the future. I want the power to shape the empire as I see fit, not through lies and manipulations like the garden, but through freedom, through the destruction of your broken reign. Athena narrowed her eyes. And how will you do that? The figure slowly raised a hand, gesturing to the gathering storm that seemed to rage outside the city. The sky above had darkened, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The empire was at war, and the faction of the shattered blade was determined to bring the entire structure down. I've already started. The people are with me. The Senate, the military, they'll turn against you. The last remnants of the garden's false power will crumble, and you'll be left with nothing. I won't let that happen, Athena said firmly. The empire will rebuild, not through destruction, but through unity. The figure shook their head. You don't understand, Athena. The people want change, not the lies of a broken system. You're a relic of the past, a symbol of everything that's wrong with the empire. Before Athena could respond, the figure flung off their cloak, revealing a set of gleaming black armor, and with a sudden, swift motion, drew a sword that gleamed with an unnatural light, an energy that seemed to pulse with malevolent power. If you want to save your empire, Empress, you'll have to defeat me. The battle that followed was nothing short of a storm. The shattered blade leader moved with an agility and speed that was unmatched. Their strikes were brutal, calculated, each swing of the blade aimed at Athena's heart. But Athena, fueled by a determination she'd never known before, met each strike with precision, her own blade dancing through the air as if it had a mind of its own. You fight well, Empress, but it won't be enough, the leader taunted, their voice dripping with malice. Athena gritted her teeth, pushing herself harder, faster. I won't let you tear this empire apart. Her blade met theirs in a clash of sparks and energy, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The two combatants were locked in a deadly dance, each refusing to yield. But then, with a sudden forceful move, Athena disarmed her opponent, sending their blade flying across the ruins. This ends now, Athena said, her voice unwavering. The leader fell to their knees, their breathing ragged. Athena stood over them, her weapon raised, ready to strike. You can't win, Athena, the leader spat, blood dripping from their lips. The people will never follow you. They'll turn on you. You'll be alone. But Athena only looked at them with cold, resolute eyes. Not if I have anything to say about it. With a swift motion, she struck. The dust settled, and the battlefield fell silent. The leader of the shattered blade was defeated, but Athena knew that this battle was only the beginning. The empire was scarred, its future uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Athena believed in the possibility of something better. She turned to her sister, Artemis, who stood nearby, watching the destruction with a heavy heart. It's over, Athena said, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. For now, Artemis replied softly. But the empire will rebuild, together. And so, with the storm finally passing, Athena knew that her work was far from over. But the future was hers to shape, and she would do it, not with fear, but with the strength of the people, united under the banner of a new empire. The end. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.